Here to open the European Parliamentary Week of 2026. So first of all, dear President Demetriou, dear Anita, dear speakers, dear deputy speakers, dear colleagues, this is one of those moments we are saying in this House when years from now people will look back and ask, when Europe was tested, did we rise to the occasion? Across our union, and I'm sure you feel this in your respective national, people feel that something is shifting. They feel it when they sit at the kitchen table at the end of the month trying to make the numbers work. They feel it when energy bills rise again, when rents climb higher, when the weekly costs are more than they did just 1 year ago. They worry that their children may not have the same opportunity that they had. Small business owners feel it acutely. Costs are up, competition is tougher, and sometimes the rules feel heavier than they should. At the same time, war continues on our continent. Tomorrow marks 4 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. 4 years that have completely changed how we think about security and how this has reminded us how fragile peace can be. In fact, tomorrow we will have a special extraordinary session of the plenary and President Zelensky will address us. All of this is happening at the same time as the global economy shifts at extraordinary speed, with others investing heavily, moving very fast and shaping the future of technology and industry in ways that will define the next decades. So I wanted to set the scene by starting to say all this because the challenges are many, but I would say also that our resolve to meet the moment is greater. Just a few days ago, at the informal leaders retreat and again at the Munich Security Conference, the message was crystal clear. Europe can no longer afford to drift. Small adjustments won't cut it anymore. The era of half measures is over, and that this is a time for decisions that match the scale of the challenges that we face together. And I believe Europe is capable of that. We proved it during the pandemic. We are proving it every day in our support for Ukraine, because when we act together, Europe can truly move mountains. Now, in each of these moments, it was our democracies all together that carried us through. It was national parliaments and this parliament taking responsibility, taking sometimes the most difficult, unprecedented decisions when it mattered most. And this week here in the European Parliament, together with you, we can all show once again that parliamentary democracy can deliver. So with that, let me warmly welcome you all to the European Parliament for this 15th European Parliamentary Week. Dear Anita, I thank you and your colleagues at the House of Representatives of the Republic of Cyprus for coordinating this week with us. Anita and I have been friends for years. We have worked together constantly, faced common challenges, have had similar debates, whether in this Parliament and yours, as I can say, for all of you. And when on 1st of January Cyprus took on the presidency of the Council, it could not have taken it at a more challenging. President Christodoulidis, and with your Parliament fully engaged, you have provided steady leadership, and I want you to know that we truly appreciate the cooperation we have. Now, this week, we are joined by well over 200 participants, including over 120 members from 27 national chambers across the European Union, as well as from 4 candidate countries, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia and Serbia. Each one of you brings with you the experience of shaping national budgets, of scrutinizing reforms, of explaining European decisions to people who expect answers. You know and you feel every day how policy translates into daily reality, how choices made here in Brussels and Strasbourg and in your own capitals affect people in towns and cities across Europe. You know what works on the ground and what needs to change. And that connection is so important, and that's why we invest so heavily in it. Because what we are discussing is essentially whether Europe can make life more affordable, whether we can bring greater stability to energy prices, whether we can create conditions for businesses to grow here in Europe rather than elsewhere, whether we can invest in skills so that workers are prepared for change and that nobody is left behind. In this Parliament, what we are doing right now is we are pushing to complete the single market. We are pushing to remove the barriers, so many of them, that still stand in our way. We are working to strengthen our energy union, so supply is secure and prices are more predictable. We are cutting unnecessary red tape that holds back entrepreneurs and innovators. And we are shaping a long-term budget that supports our regions, that backs our farmers and equips the next generation with real opportunities. But none of this will work in isolation. And for this we need you completely. European decisions only work if they reflect national realities. Each election after election, we learn this more and more. And if such decisions are explained clearly at home, and you are that bridge, so over the next 2 days, your discussions will help shape how we move forward. So this is no ordinary week, for more reasons than one. I mentioned a special sitting tomorrow of the European Parliament. This will be a moment to reaffirm our commitment and support to Ukraine, and to show that when Europe is challenged, it stands together and it acts together. So all of you are invited to follow that sitting from the tribunes, and I truly hope that many of you will join us as we mark that moment of unity and of resolve. So colleagues, this is truly Europe's moment. The people who placed their trust in us when they went to the ballot box, they are watching what we do. They expect us to act, and we cannot afford to hesitate. So over the next 2 days, let us match words with action and show that when Europe is tested, it rises to the occasion. So now, it is my true honor to give the floor to my dear friend, to the President of the House of Representatives of the Republic of Cyprus, dear Anita. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my dear Roberta, and allow me to extend my warmest greetings to each and every one of you. And you allow me, of course, to speak in my mother language, in Greek. Εξοχότατη κυρία Πρόεδρε του Ευρωπαϊκού Κοινοβουλίου.
Distinguished President of the European Parliament, good friend to Cyprus, and my personal friend, dear Roberta, colleagues, members of the European Parliament, guests, representatives from the different parliaments throughout Europe and the European institutions that represent our values and our principles of identity and a European perspective. It's an immense honor and pleasure to open our session for the European Parliamentary Week, organized by the European Parliament and the representatives of Cyprus within the context of the parliamentary context for Cyprus's presidency. Allow me to thank the European Parliament and the President, my friend, for the close collaboration and hospitality shown to us here in Brussels. We've come together not just as representatives of institutions and countries, but as stewards of a common goal, one that was born from conflict and which matured through crises and is now a guiding star for the entire continent. What we do in this continent is based on dialogue. We discuss our differences with a view to uniting and integrating. This is not the result of pure similarities. This is a chance to really build something. And the resilience of our democracy is based on that. We are living in a time of uncertainty and change. The war in Ukraine has reminded us that peace and security in our continent cannot be taken for granted. What happened in Ukraine 4 years ago happened in my country 50 years ago. My country knows all too well what violations of international law look like, what occupation looks like, what invasions look like. So we will continue to support Ukraine, and simultaneously, we will follow what goes on the international stage. This is in all our interest. It's not just our resilience that's at stake, it's the unity that we have in what we believe and what we say. The time we're living in is characterized by a flood of information, but not necessarily knowledge. Media, which could support democracy, often acts as a source of false information. Lies spread faster than the truth. Artificial intelligence is about a balance between manipulation and the truth. Currently, fanaticism is spreading. Societies are polarizing. There are multiple parallel realities. The Eurobarometer has shown this is true. Citizens call for security and perspective, greater unity, and greater, more effective political action. And so, the European Parliament and national parliaments' roles must be more decisive in this context. We are the guardians of democratic legitimization. We must ensure that there is accountability and democratic participation beyond fanaticism and polarization. We must build bridges between European decision-making and the daily lives of our citizens. Often the gap seems huge, but in practice it's not. Quite the contrary, I would say. Strengthening parliamentary debate is a democratic necessity, not just an obligation. It is only through closer cooperation that we'll be able to mold European policy that will allow us to face strategic dependence on strategic raw materials, our need to increase defense spending and military spending, multiple transitions, demographic challenges, and a scarcity of skills, as well as migratory pressures and their weaponization. President, representatives, at this moment, a small country on the southeastern borders of Europe, partially occupied, has taken on a great responsibility. Cyprus, my homeland, has the honor of taking on the presidency for the European Council. The size of a country is not what we can use to measure the footprint it leaves on the European Union. All countries are the same in that sense. And Cyprus, which has been a member state of the EU for over 20 years, continues to suffer the consequences of occupation in part of its territory by Turkey, and takes on this presidency well aware of its responsibilities. We hope to act as an honest mediator in developing and building synergies, work towards common interests to bolster resilience in Europe. That is our duty. Our geographic position in the East Mediterranean is strategic and allows us to contribute concretely to building bridges between countries and promoting a foreign policy that is not just based on our economic interests. It will also take into consideration the UN Charter and the principles of the European Union, as well as international law. As a small island state, we believe that our greatest diplomatic success has been our full participation in building the European project. And we also believe that we've been given a tremendous opportunity with this presidency. We are more aware than ever that we cannot use or support international law only when it benefits us. We must be consistent both within and outside of the European Union. Madam President, representatives, Europe is at a crossroads. This is a crucial moment. The challenges that we face call on us to take larger steps. We must take giant steps forward in order to solve the problems that our citizens face. We must take advantage of every possibility when it comes to competitivity, productivity, technology, so that the EU is not left behind. The green transition must be fair, and the next MFF must better represent our aspirations. Our continent must lead in protecting democracy in a time of fanaticism. We must promote the truth in a time of false information. We must be just. We must be just in a divided world. At a time of great polarization, we must lead by example. Through agreement, we must provide security. The union, having a union doesn't mean that there aren't diverging opinions. We have to find a way to unite those diverging opinions. The generation that established the EU took a large step forward, and it is now incumbent upon us to keep that momentum. A small country like Cyprus can, through the European institutions, contribute to building our shared future. Representatives, we must bet on our union and ensure that our diversity of voices act as our strongest tool. It is our responsibility. We must stand up to the challenges that we face. We cannot remain still. We cannot allow polarization and fragmentation to take hold. We must hold space. We have to decide what we will strengthen and what we will leave behind. We must believe in our common future. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, dear Anita. Thank you to you all. Before we conclude the formal opening of this European Parliamentary Week 2026, I'd like to thank all of you members of national parliaments. You will have a lot of discussions also with members of the European Parliament over the next couple of days. We hope to see you, as I said, tomorrow during the solemn session. In a few moments you will move to the 3 parallel inter-parliamentary committee meetings. These will start at 3:30. These exchanges give us the chance to bring together national and European perspectives on our union's economic and policy challenges within the framework of the European semester and beyond. So I wish you all a very productive session, a very inspiring one. Try to meet as many members as possible, and if you need anything, please, we are here to help. Thanks a lot. Have a good afternoon. Okay, good afternoon, everybody.
Polarization. We must build bridges between European decision-making and the daily lives of our citizens. Often the gap seems huge, but in practice it's not. Quite the contrary, I would say. Strengthening parliamentary debate is a democratic necessity, not just an obligation. It is only through closer cooperation that we'll be able to mold European policy that will allow us to face strategic dependence on strategic raw materials, our need to increase defense spending and military spending, multiple transitions, demographic challenges, and a scarcity of skills, as well as migratory pressures and their weaponization. President, representatives, at this moment, a small country on the southeastern borders of Europe, partially occupied, has taken on a great responsibility. Cyprus, my homeland, has the honor of taking on the presidency for the European Council. The size of a country is not what we can use to measure the footprint it leaves on the European Union. All countries are the same in that sense. And Cyprus, which has been a member state of the EU for over 20 years, continues to suffer the consequences of occupation in part of its territory by Turkey, and takes on this presidency well aware of its responsibilities. We hope to act as an honest mediator in developing and building synergies, work towards common interests to bolster resilience in Europe. That is our duty. Our geographic position in the East Mediterranean is strategic and allows us to contribute concretely to building bridges between countries and promoting a foreign policy that is not just based on our economic interests. It will also take into consideration the UN Charter and the principles of the European Union, as well as international law. As a small island state, we believe that our greatest diplomatic success has been our full participation in building the European project. And we also believe that we've been given a tremendous opportunity with this presidency. We are more aware than ever that we cannot use or support international law only when it benefits us. We must be consistent both within and outside of the European Union. Madam President, representatives, Europe is at a crossroads. This is a crucial moment. The challenges that we face call on us to take larger steps. We must take giant steps forward in order to solve the problems that our citizens face. We must take advantage of every possibility when it comes to competitivity, productivity, technology, so that the EU is not left behind. The green transition must be fair, and the next MFF must better represent our aspirations. Our continent must lead in protecting democracy. In a time of fanaticism, we must promote the truth. In a time of false information, we must be just. We must be just in a divided world. At a time of great polarization, we must lead by example. Through agreement, we must provide security. The union, having a union doesn't mean that there aren't diverging opinions. We have to find a way to unite those diverging opinions. The generation that established
international organisations and civil society to prevent and eliminate this phenomenon and work to ensure that children the world over grow up in a world of peace. Thank you to our speakers. We're going to take a short break now, after which we'll resume with the next item on the agenda. 2 minutes break. Thank you.
Bonjour, chers collègues. J'espère que vous allez bien. Je vous propose qu'on démarre nos travaux avec le point 1 de l'ordre du jour, qui est l'approbation de l'ordre du jour. Y a-t-il des remarques? Je n'en vois pas. L'ordre du jour est réputé validé. Deuxième point, communication de la présidence. Comme d'habitude, je vous rappelle que notre réunion...
Anti-Racism Action Plan of 2022 to 2025 that was presented in 2020. On the 25th of September 2024, the Commission also issued a report on the implementation of the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan. The new strategy aims at tackling structural racism, enforcing anti-discrimination legislation, and stepping up protection against racial hatred, strengthening social equality and cohesion, fostering key partnerships, and leading by example. And today we have the pleasure of hosting in Libe Ms. Ana Carla Pereira, Director for Equality and Non-Discrimination of DG Just of the European Commission, and she will present the new strategy. So to start with, I would like to give you floor for 7-8 minutes for your introductory remarks. So Mrs. Pereira, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy, and it is an honor to come to present the new anti-racism strategy to this committee. As you know, as of 2023, almost 2 out of 3 Europeans perceive racial discrimination to be widespread in their member states, with 61% believing this is related to skin color. This troubling perception extends further to our Roma communities, where life expectancy remains 8 years shorter than the average European. Every second Roma child is educated in a segregated school, where all or most pupils are Roma. Furthermore, nearly half of the people of African descent in the EU find themselves overqualified in their jobs. Each of these realities reminds us of the systematic hurdles that racialized individuals endure. Racial discrimination costs the European Union an estimated 12 billion in lost gross domestic product annually, a figure that highlights the economic imperative of addressing inequality. So addressing racism and combating racism is not only a good thing, morally speaking and human rights speaking, it's also the smart thing to do, because we are looking at the interests of social cohesion in the EU, but also at its future prosperity. The new anti-racism strategy builds on the achievements of the 2020-25 action plan and proposes a forward-looking framework designed to address the structural dimensions of racism, while underlying the importance of making sure that existing legal protections translate into lived rights. The strategy has several objectives, and Madam Chair already mentioned them, so let me focus on 3 of them. Let me first start with strengthening enforcement. Despite a strong EU legal framework, many people continue to experience racial discrimination and racist violence, often without reporting incidents or being able to access legal redress. Weak enforcement and inconsistent sanctions undermine trust in public institutions and limit the deterrent effect of the law. Our objective is to focus on enforcement and protection, ensuring that existing legal safeguards against discrimination, hate crime and hate speech are effective and accessible. We are also going to publish the 4th report analysing the application of the Racial Equality Directive, which will address the effectiveness of national sanction regimes. It will also look into emerging risks such as algorithmic discrimination linked to artificial intelligence. In parallel, we are working on standards for equality bodies by seeking to reinforce their independence and effectiveness and enhance the response to hate crime and speech. We do so through monitoring, training, and data collection in support to policy making. Our second objective in the strategy is to address racism on all walks of life, meaning employment, education, housing, healthcare, because racism manifests itself in all these areas through invisible barriers, barriers that we must dismantle through concerted action. To this end, we will support inclusive education.
Is web streamed. We have an interpretation in English, French and German. The draft agenda has been sent to you. I don't see any remarks. The agenda is adopted. I also want to go over to point 2. The draft minutes for a meeting of 14th of January was sent to you beforehand. I don't see any comments. You can still send in comments till tomorrow morning, and then the draft minutes will be approved. Dear colleagues, I just finished the meeting of the Joint Bureau of the Africa-European Parliamentary Assembly, and I'm happy to inform you that we will have begun preparations for the inaugural assembly, which will be held from 12 to 14 May in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. We will discuss this in more detail at our next meeting in Strasbourg in March. And then we now come to the political point of our agenda today, the exchange of view on the political situation.
Omulungi atulaba ate era atugoberera mu bitundu by'eggwanga Uganda eby'enjawulo.
And the post-electoral situation in the presence of Mr. Robert
era tugenda kubeera nga mwanattu ensonga zonna tuzifunira ddala
Unity Platform, main opposition party in Uganda. He is remote connection. Then we have Dr. Sarah Birete, chairperson of the Global Network of Domestic Election Monitors and executive director of the Uganda Civic Organization Center for Constitutional Governance. She's also remotely connected. And then we have here with us Mr. Jonas Johnson, head of division EAS, Africa 5, Horn of Africa, East Africa. Dear colleague, distinguished guests,
abantu basobole okuba nga bonna bagifuna ate tusobole okuba nga tugoberera ensonga basobole okuba nga agifuna.
Europe in terms of regional peace and security. Uganda is a primary troop contributor to regional peacekeeping, particularly in Somalia, and it plays a key role in mediating conflicts in South Sudan and the DRC. Uganda is also a major refugee hosting nation, influencing regional stability by providing refuge and security to a large number of displaced persons. As partners, we want to work together to improve the situation of the Ugandan population. At the same time, we must be clear that our commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms in the European Parliament is non-negotiable. We will not shy away from difficult conversation and will not contribute to the silencing of opposition. In the spirit of partnership, as illustrated by the Samoa Agreement, we wanted to have an opportunity to discuss these issues of concern with the government of Uganda. Unfortunately, the ambassador couldn't be here today with us, but we will sure make a new appointment so that we can also have an exchange of view with the ambassador. It is important to note that accountability is one of the central principles of democracy and it applies to the EU treaties. As part of its oversight role within the EU institutions and parliamentary diplomacy, the European Parliament regularly adopts resolutions on electoral processes worldwide, particularly when credible reports raise strong concerns. Resolutions are an essential means by which the European Parliament expresses its view on political processes, EU politics and global developments. The Parliament also uses resolutions to scrutinise other EU institutions, including the European Council, as part of its democratic oversight role within the European Union. In the resolution on Uganda, which is adopted on the 12th February, which was supported by an overwhelming majority of members, 514 votes in favour, 3 against and 56 abstentions, we note serious concerns regarding the conduct and aftermath of the Ugandan general elections held on the 15th of January 2026, which has unfortunately failed to meet fundamental democratic standards. That opposition leaders and members such as Robert Kyagulanyi, it's easier to pronounce Bobi Wine, and human rights defenders such as Sarah Birete were particularly targeted in a very alarming manner with arbitrary arrests, prolonged detention and even disappearances. This is why we called in our resolution for the end of all violence, threats, harassment arbitrary detention of opposition figures, activists and critics, the dropping of all politically motivated charges, the lifting of arbitrary suspension of civil society groups, and the organization of comprehensive electoral and institutional reforms to ensure the independence of the Electoral Commission and judiciary. We also called for independent and impartial investigations into crimes against humanity committed by Ugandan political and military leaders, and into similar crimes committed by politicians and military in other African countries. We have here with us today NUP leader Mr. Bobi Wine, who himself has been a subject of institutional harassment and who said that his wife and children fled Uganda for fear of their lives following the January 15 presidential election. The European Parliament resolution also mentioned very serious concerns about how the opposition has been treated in the run-up, during and after the elections. We are eager to hear an update from your side. We would also welcome some concrete ideas on the way forward for Uganda. Dear sir, you have the floor. Good afternoon, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, friends. Greetings. I appreciate so much the opportunity. I want to appreciate the European Union Parliament for the resolution on Uganda and for keeping an eye on Uganda. We don't take it for granted. Every time we see development partners keeping an eye on what is happening here in Uganda. We also recognize that the EU is an important partner to Uganda, and we intend to maintain and also improve this partnership and this cooperation. We would also love to see this relationship happening between the people of Uganda and the European Union, not just General Museveni's illegitimate military regime. I'm still on the run. I'm still in hiding because of the continuing threats on my life since what happened on the 16th of January when my house was, my compound was raided and I fled my house. And also the following raid that happened on the 23rd of January where my wife was assaulted and my family members were assaulted, and the military took over my home, which the military still occupies to the present day. My home is surrounded and the military is in charge of it now. What happened on the 15th of January and the preceding days was not an election. It was a military operation, and I'm very glad that it was clearly stated during the debate in the European Union Parliament. This violence started much earlier. It started on nomination day, and it went on through the campaign trail. And I'm glad that the resolution mentions in specifics victims like Mesa Chokero, who was shot and killed, and also General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is the military chief and the son of General Museveni, came out on Twitter and, mentioned how he killed 22 of our people and hoping that I would be the 23rd. I must mention, though, that the numbers that he put are much less. Maybe he mentioned or he meant those that he killed personally. Otherwise, the numbers that we have of the victims, of the people that have been killed, are much more than 22. Many civil society organizations were closed down, especially those that are in the area of governance. It was mentioned, and I want to reiterate it again, that the internet was shut down 3 days before the election. Media houses were ordered not to relay the results that were happening and all that was going on ground on the polling stations, to ensure that there's a clear disconnect between what was happening in the polling stations and what was being relayed by the Electoral Commission. I'm very glad that Dr. Sarah Birete is with us today. in this meeting. She was arrested, detained, because she was taking an effort to speak out and educate people, the citizens of Uganda, about their rights and on democracy. I mentioned it that 2 of my deputy presidents were abducted on the eve of the elections, and they remained missing for 3 weeks. We later learned that they were being detained in a military barracks, in a special forces military barracks, which is run by General Museveni's son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba. Most of our coordinators were arrested, were picked and detained. Some are still in detention, while some were dropped off. These also included officials from our election management committee. So what Mr. Byabakama, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, relayed was actually completely different from what happened on the grounds. The law requires that there must be coordination in the tallying of the results. That did not happen. The candidates were not given copies of declaration of result forms, and the Electoral Commission simply declared numbers that it did not justify where they were coming from. As we speak, we are still demanding that the Electoral Commission uploads the declaration forms so that the nation can be able to follow in transparency, so we can be able to compare the evidence that we have, the declaration of result forms that we have, to what was paraded by the Electoral Commission. But up to now, they have not uploaded the results on the internet like it's supposed to be. Somebody may ask, why then didn't we go to court? But we've mentioned it again, that institutions in Uganda have all been destroyed, and including the judiciary. The manner of appointment of the Chief Justice recently is evidence to that. The Chief Justice was sworn in General Museveni's farm. So that and many other reasons cause us not to have trust in the judiciary in Uganda, and many times the regime, General Museveni or his son, have actually been guiding publicly and sometimes privately, determining how the judiciary does its work. So we found no redress whatsoever in the Ugandan judiciary, and that's why we did not go to court. We have presented some asks which I want to reiterate here. We've asked for targeted sanctions that target particular individuals and regime officials that have, excelled in gross human rights violations. We believe that will curb their appetite in abusing, human rights, in undermining democracy, and to ensure that there's accountability for their crimes against humanity. Because I know we have other speakers on the platform, I want to appreciate you for the opportunity and to further call for more interest and for more attention to the people of Uganda. We really appreciate the attention, but we still request the international community to keep an eye on Uganda, to keep an eye on what is going on here in our country. I thank you for God and my country.
Thank you very much. I can promise we will do that. I make sure as a chair of the delegation EU-Africa that we will keep an eye on Uganda, and we will follow up the situation very closely. We have also here with us today prominent human rights lawyer and expert on constitutional governments, Dr. Sarah Birete, who was arrested a few days before the vote to give us her own account on the situation from the civil society perspective. You have the floor, Dr. Birete. Welcome in this meeting. We don't hear you. Maybe put the mic on the technical level. Try again.
Hello.
Yes, now we hear you.
Yes.
Hello.
Thank you so much, and I wish to add my voice to that of Honorable Robert Chagrani to thank you for the interest you're showing in the plight of Ugandans under a context of declining democracy. I want to start by re-echoing the values of the EU as enshrined under Article 2 of the European Union Treaty. And these are the values that we look up to: the values of human dignity, the values of freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, and respect for human rights. The same values are enshrined in our constitution in Uganda, and they guide our work as a constitutional watchdog, the Center for Constitutional Governance, and the Human Rights Defender, and the work that I do as a chairperson of the Global Network for Domestic Election Observers. On 30th December, I was not feeling well. I was in bed sleeping. I was awakened by the children that police had sieged our home. About 30 police and military officers had surrounded our home. 15 of these officers entered into the compound and were captured by the CCTV camera at my home. 5 of these officers entered up to my bedroom where I was sleeping under medication with two guns. As I woke up to take a shower in my bathroom, 2 armed officers kept guard on my open bathroom, violating my right to privacy, violating my dignity. I was incarcerated for 3 days at Natete police station under difficult conditions of restricted access to family and lawyers. My child, I was allowed my son and my niece to bring me meals, but they would be held for more than 3 hours before serving me a simple meal, yet I was undergoing heavy medication in incarceration. I was denied legal representation. My lawyers only met me a few hours on 1st of January, a few hours to interrogation. During interrogation, I had 4 lawyers present at the police station. I was denied legal representation. I was alone. And 1 lawyer was told to sit outside and he will be invited by the police if needed. Yet Article 23 of the Constitution provides that any person suspected of having committed a crime is entitled to legal representation, access to family, lawyers, and doctors. I was denied. All my visitors were chased away. I was held 2 days without knowing the offense I had committed. And when it clocked 44 hours in detention, that's when an officer came to interrogate me. And I was asked questions regarding the president and his son and the media interviews I do as part of my work in advocacy. During arrest, all the phones that were in my home, including those of my children, were wrongly confiscated by the police in a scuffle that led to assault of my children, and the phones of my children were held for more than 1 month, and they were left at home with no means of communication. My phone is still in police custody, and I have started experiencing digital impersonation. My handle on TikTok, my personal handle, has been brought down by hackers, yet it's registered in the phone that is with police. 3 different accounts have been opened in my names using my biodata and my place of work, and they post offensive communication using deep fakes. The communication is related to what I was interrogated about. 2 of these accounts were opened when I was in detention in prison. And with my phone in the hands of police and with digital impersonation, I don't know what else they are doing regarding my personal data and communication. Towards elections, I was profiled as a highly dangerous person because of the work that I do as a chairperson of the GENDEM, chairperson of the Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observers Network, vice chairperson of the Africa Elections Observer Network, and president of the East Africa Civil Society Forum. The security thinks that this work that I do in the region, on the continent, and at the global level is dangerous, and it warrants me being treated as a terrorist because of promoting democracy and human rights. This profiling is what led to my detention and the charges that are related to a voter register, which I have never seen, that are related to sharing of data on a voter register, which is a public document, and these are the charges that I am battling in court. When you look at the work, the characterization of my work during travels at the airport, some random security officers would ask me what I do and why I travel so much. And the work was characterized as recruiting for opposition, as fundraising for opposition in security files. This is how I became a target of regime harassment. The unwritten offenses by the military and the security agencies in Uganda is that if you are a promoter of democracy and human rights, then you are a dangerous person to the government of Uganda. Our constitutional watchdog, the organization that I head locally, capitalizes on demanding for accountable leadership in line with the Constitution of Uganda. But calling out to the regime to account on human rights violations on several media platforms is what rendered me to be branded as a criminal in Uganda. The siege under my home, which lasted for more than 2 hours, surrounding the whole neighborhood, took away, violated our privacy, led to assault of my children, led to the detention of their phones, and depriving them of a right to communicate or study, including those that were engaged in online studies. I will now embark on the plight of civil society organizations in Uganda. The suspension of work permits for organizations that work on governance, human rights, and elections violates the NGO Act of Uganda, violates the NGO Amendment Act of 2024, because the definition of the NGO Bureau in Section 16 means the board members of the Bureau. These board members do not exist after rationalization. The secretary who signed forms purporting to be holding out as the Bureau is impersonating the Bureau and has no such mandate. And the suspended NGOs were not given a right to be heard, which is a right provided for in the NGO Act. And the indefinite suspension of permits is in effect closure of NGOs without due process. The NGOs have been intimidated into silence because of a mention of activities prejudicial to national security, and most of them are hopeless and they cannot fight back. My third issue is on general human rights violations in Uganda. The militarization of the accreditation process for voter education and election observation leading to elections, which we refused saying that voter education cannot be the business of the military. And because we were pushing back protecting the laws of Uganda, we were then marked as dangerous. In this election, there was no credible voter education, high militarization of elections, and disruption of opposition campaigns, especially those of the National Unity Platform, disrupted by the military and police, including roadblocks, the issues that we were talking about that led to the arrest.
Ms. Barrett, I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Our chair, Hilde Woutmans, had to leave, so I'm stepping in for her. My name is Ingeborg Telek, and I'm the vice chair of this committee. Can I ask you, please, to come to your conclusions, because I assume this was your third and last item you wanted to address, or not?
Yes, please. I will mention the state of judicial and rule of law as I go towards the conclusion.
Thank you.
We have the weak judiciary in place with questionable legitimacy because the Bar Association of Uganda has been locked out of the Judicial Service Commission, and the ongoing appointments, including that of the Chief Justice and Principal Judge, have questionable legitimacy because of lack of quorum at the Judicial Service Commission. There is also abuse of the presumption of innocence by the courts of Uganda, and anybody suspected of committing a crime is treated as if they have already been convicted, and this is a violation of Article 28 of the Constitution. As I conclude, I want to re-echo the diplomatic relations between the EU member states and citizens of Uganda. There is remarkable silence from your representatives in Uganda, and we understand the diplomatic relations to be relations between member states while promoting the pride and welfare of citizens. There is silence on violation of human rights in Uganda. There is silence on the re-echoing of EU values that are enshrined under Article 2 of the treaty. And through you, I want to request that the people of Uganda should not be pushed to lose confidence in your representatives in our capitals by neglecting the rule of law and rights of the people. I thank you so much.
Asante sana, Mrs. Biriti, and your message is very well heard on this side. It's very well heard by the Parliament, and thank you so much for your intervention. And I think you really paved the way for our next speaker to also say something about the diplomatic relationships we hold as Europe with Uganda. So I want to give the floor to Mr. Jonas Jonasson, head of the unit for the Horn of Africa and East Africa in the European External Action Service. Mr. Johnson is the European Parliament resolution specifically called on the EU to engage with Ugandan authorities regarding violations, close monitoring relevant trails, and to review cooperation with the assistance for Uganda to ensure respect for EU principles, as Mrs. Bariti was saying, implementing targeted sanctions and prioritize support for civil society, human rights, and LGBTIQ plus defenders and journalists. Can you please inform us about what the EEAS has been doing so far, both in Brussels and in Kampala, and how do you see the way forward? Mrs. Jonasson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, honourable members of this Parliament and distinguished colleagues also in this discussion, like the previous speakers. It's a very important opportunity indeed to discuss the situation in Uganda and EU-Uganda relations. Indeed, I would like to say a few words about that on our assessment of the elections and indeed, Chair, as you said, on the way ahead. Mm-hmm. First of all, I just wanted to refer to our statement of the 23rd of January, where we commented and acknowledged the results of the elections, but also expressed our regrets, especially with regard to post-election violence and threats against the opposition. The chair already referred to the context of, indeed, EU-Uganda relations, where obviously there are many shared areas of common interest for cooperation with Uganda and with Ugandan people, which ranges from trade and investments, green transition, connectivity, climate resilience, sustainable forestry, etc. And in all of this, as you know, one of our flagship initiatives, the Global Gateway Strategy, is very prominent here. I will refrain from going into details, but also to say, as the chair already mentioned, that Uganda's role in the region for peace and security is very important. Somalia was mentioned. Uganda's role as a major refugee hosting nation is very important and contributing to regional stabilization. And of course, Uganda has a global voice, for example, chairing the non-aligned movement. And in all of this, we stress that Uganda, through our governance programs, also strengthens democratic process and civil society. And we believe that our economic cooperation and in all these areas that I mentioned will also promote the interest of youth, notably. Having said that, the EU continues to support governance reforms, civil society and human rights initiatives, because sustainable development depends on accountable institutions, the rule of law and inclusive participation. And over many years, we have worked with Ugandan institutions and stakeholders to support democratic processes through election observation, governance programs, civic participation initiatives, and sustained political dialogue to contribute to an environment where political competition remains peaceful, inclusive, and trusted by citizens, as we have heard, is a very major issue. On the recent elections, actually our observations, and I knew that there would have been a representative also of the EU-Uganda COMESA findings of the elections. They largely coincide and align, which acknowledge the largely peaceful conduct of voting while highlighting concerns related to the political playing field, arrests of opposition actors, and restrictions affecting access to information. And such observations underline the importance of continuous dialogue aimed at strengthening electoral credibility over time. And as I already said, we said publicly we regretted the post-electoral violence and threats, particularly against opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi, Bobi Wine, and we called on all parties to exercise restraint on the authorities to ensure the safety of all political actors. Looking ahead, electoral reforms remains an important area of engagement, and we continue to encourage progress on issues such as the independence of the Electoral Commission, transparency in results management, campaign finance, oversight, equitable media access, and effective dispute resolution mechanism, and anchoring all these reforms in Uganda's own constitutional jurisprudence. Through initiatives such as governance programs, the EU has supported civic education, dialogue platforms, rule of law initiatives, and capacity building efforts designed to strengthen institutions and encourage peaceful political participation as a long-term strategy to promote democracy and the rule of law. And for this reason, we remain our engagement with all actors, government institutions, opposition representatives, but also civil society, religious leaders and security actors, because we want to support this inclusive dialogue. We will therefore also continue to engage as a predictable, principled and long-term partner supporting Uganda's democratic journey through dialogue, cooperation and shared commitment to stability and inclusive government. That is particularly important as we actually celebrate this year the 50th anniversary of our relationship. And in that spirit, we would like to continue the support to the issues we have discussed today. But I want to stress that we are closely and we continue to closely monitoring the situation, as we've heard about today, the political and civic space, as well as the human rights situation in the country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to colleagues, to members. Would you please, do you have questions? Would you like to speak out or to intervene? Yes, please. Yes, please, Mr. Ujian.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for organizing this today's hearing. And I would like first to say on a personal note to Robert, all the best for you and for your family as well. We had the opportunity to discuss with David Lewis a couple of days ago about the situation during the election. And indeed, this looks more like a military operation, as you say, than to a real election. And for me, it's quite obvious that Uganda is can be at the same time this country that is brings stability to the region by engaging with neighbors and by hosting refugees from neighbors. And at the same time being horrible to its own opposition to people that engage in civil society. In a way, this country has kind of a split personality, being good at this on the one hand and mean to the inside, and that this state is a state as a booty for the Museveni family, and the regime can be seen today. Today there was planned to be held a Catholic Mass in the Lubaga Cathedral for political prisoner, Dr. Kisa Pasigye, and other political prisoners that has been cancelled on the last minute by the Archbishop, probably because he got a call that it would be wise not to do this. For me, this shows that this is not a free country. And I can only say that for me, there's no transparency in those elections, and already acknowledging the results of such a fraudulent election is taking part in supporting a regime that is, from my point of view, not duly elected. So I think that we are already too positive on that note as a European Union. So it's said several times that the Ugandan constitution is very clear on the provisions, but apparently nobody cares, at least from those who are in the regime. So my question to our friends in Uganda is, what can we do further to support democracy and rule of law and human rights in Uganda, a part of doing what we do today, which is putting light to this situation. You request for targeted sanctions. My question to BAS is, what is hindering us if we know clearly that there are some people personally involved in abducting people, killing people, to put in place targeted sanction? These are my two questions to our esteemed guests. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other colleagues who want to take the floor or not? Otherwise, I would like to give the floor back to Uganda, to Mr. Kuyangulani, Mr. Bobi Wine. Sorry for your family name is a little bit difficult for me to pronounce.
Yeah.
If you can give the floor first to you and then to Mrs. B. Rita. Yes.
Sure. May I request that you repeat the question again, please?
So, Robert, first I said all the best for you personally and for your family, but I wanted to know a part of putting light on the situation and organizing meetings like this and calling for targeted sanctions. What else can we do in order to support you on the ground that are working for democracy in your country?
Thank you very much. I'll talk about what you can do from your end and what you can do from our end here in Uganda. From your end, of course, you can apply targeted sanctions. And I hear very many times regime apologists claiming that when you put targeted sanctions on individuals, it affects the nation. No, it does not. It saves the nation. You can slap targeted sanctions, travel sanctions, economic and legal, to the individuals, which individuals we have presented internationally, and others have actually come out themselves, like General Muhoozi, Museveni's son. You have laws like the Global Magnitsky, which has been applied to many human rights violators. We request that the same be applied to the regime back in Uganda. But also association. I mean, it slaps those who believes in democracy and human rights in the face when they see ambassadors or diplomats from the world-known democracies standing shoulder to shoulder with gross human rights violations. For example, imagine just a day or hours after General Muhoozi tweets taking pride in murdering people, in attacking people's families and undressing people and tweeting it, taking pride in killing. And then the next minute, you're going to see an official picture of an ambassador from a renowned democracy standing shoulder to shoulder. That is embracing, that is legitimizing impunity. And we call for a distancing on that. I mean, I've not seen an ambassador or an government official from a democracy standing shoulder to shoulder with Lukashenko or these other, renowned dictators. Also, we have requested that for all the aid that is extended to Uganda, let it be conditional. Let it be conditioned to respect to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. That would be very helpful. If it is not possible to cut out any cooperation, of course, the best thing would be for a democracy to disassociate from anything that contradicts the same. However, if it is not achievable to completely disassociate, then at least let there be a minimum of demanded, reforms that can lead Uganda to a line of democracy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bobi Wine. And now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Sarah Biriti. I don't see her. Are you still there? Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Sarah, can you say something
thank you so much
about what we can do from our side? More.
Yes, I associate myself with the submissions of Honorable Chagrani on what you can do. I just want to re-emphasize 3 issues. One is that you should use more of the Global Magnitsky Act on individuals that are engaged in gross violations of human rights in Uganda. 2 is that you should put stringent measures to your funding agreements regarding the protection of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Uganda that are at their lowest at this time, and we are worried about the next 5 years as citizens. 3 is that you should support more people as compared to government, empower the people to fight for and protect their democracy. This is what you can do.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Biriti. And now, last, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Johnson. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about the sanctions, but also the conditions for aid.
Thank you very much. Well, it has been many references to the treaties of the European Union, and of course that is what's steering our engagement with all our partners globally. So it also in this case, of course, our development cooperation and our cooperation in general is not unconditional. It is based on our very clear values and expectations. In the case of Uganda, I've already outlined how we, at this stage, we monitor the situation very, very closely. We are engaging in a dialogue with both government, indeed, but also opposition and civil society. All of this, of course, is not happening in the public eye, but there is clearly a very proactive approach that we have, and also, of course, frank discussions. And it's through our development cooperation and the cooperation that we have, of course, we target that very much to governance and support to civil society, as I've outlined. And we have the possibility of focusing additionally on that as we deem necessary, and to accompany a reform process. So the way we today, the approach that we have today is one of engagement, and the proposals of restrictive measures have not been on the table in these discussions and in our and also in our discussions with our member states.
Thank you. And I would like to thank all our speakers, or all our guests for today, for their interventions. And I also would like to emphasize and to stress that we as European Parliament are committed to support a peaceful and prosperous society in Uganda, and to do the work with all the relevant stakeholders to achieve this. So we will continue closely monitoring the situation in Uganda. And we do call on the Ugandan authorities to guarantee the possibility of a safe return, physical integrity and freedom of movement for Mr. Robert Kyagulanyi, Bobi Wine, as well as to ensure due process and an independent investigation into the arbitrary arrest and detention of Dr. Sarah Biriti. With this, dear colleagues, this brings us almost to the end of this meeting. If there are no more questions for the members, then I would like to close today's meeting. The next date of the next delegation meeting will be communicated in time. So hereby I close the meeting. So I'm very sorry. Good to see you. I'm sorry. So yeah, next time. Okay. Thank you so much.